Hands down, The Boys has some of the most creative yet brutal death sequences in the history of television. Remember Popclaw's landlord and how she crushed his skull under her kitty cat during their cunnilingus? Well, that's just the tip. I mean, the tip of the iceberg that The Boys' deaths are. But not all have been brutal for their shock value. Some have been brutal for you and me as the audience because of how gut-wrenching they are, because of the emotional upheaval caused by such demises. And in this video, I'm gonna rank 19 of the major death sequences. So, without further ado, let's begin, shall we? Homelander, Season 5. Homelander had it coming. From the beginning of time, Homelander had it coming. And right from the beginning, it had been made clear that the boys would give him a send-off as brutal as the man Homelander was. But as a viewer, there were just so many things that shook me to my core. Firstly, after Kimiko strips Homelander of his powers, the psychological toll of seeing him suddenly drop to this childlike state was profound and extremely shocking. I knew that Homelander was still a scared little man-child on the inside, but I didn't expect that he would look so visibly terrified and beg for his life like a child. And this instant regression, made only more impactful by Anthony Starr's wonderful performance, made me wonder if killing him as he desperately begged to be spared was a good idea or morally justified. But of course, I was wrong. It was just the show's talent that made me sympathetic for this vile, violent, and purely evil man, and he had to go. There were no two ways about it. But the punches and the begging were brutal for me mentally. And then came the physical aspect. Butcher uses a crowbar to stick it to Homelander's skull and just lifts it up, opening his skull and scalp to reveal his brain. The brain that no one could have ever imagined seeing all this while. But Butcher did it, and probably even made the strongest stomached people feel a tick down in their spines. Interestingly, it was this second time Butcher killed someone in this fashion. In the comics, it was actually Black Noir who attacked and forcefully impregnated Becca. However, Black Noir was actually Homelander's clone in the comic, and he disguised himself as America's first man-child while committing all these atrocities. Apart from the Becca incident, Black Noir also practiced cannibalism and necrophilia with women and child victims. And Butcher kills an already wounded Black Noir in almost the exact same fashion. Crowbar to the skull, then lifted open, then lifted upwards to open the bloody skull. And lastly, I think Homelander's death had another layer of brutality, and it was Butcher's satisfaction after killing Homelander. Like the smile on his face, the sense of achievement. But it didn't last for long because Butcher immediately set his sight on the Soup genocide. And of course, the brutal quotient was further elevated because Ryan survives the fallout, loses his powers, and ultimately rejects both father figures instead of simply becoming Butcher's happy ending. Although he hated what his father had become, the entire endgame still leaves him scarred by the mess Homelander and Butcher created. And those, my friends, are all the reasons I put this powerful piece of shit at number 1. Victoria Newman, Season 4 Finale. Victoria Newman's death in the Season 4 finale was brutal in every manner of the term, and for several reasons. But it was also very lame, and no one can argue that. Miss Newman had her fair share of trauma as a resident of Red River, a home for the orphaned and often unmarketable Soups. Much like Marie Moreau, Newman had also accidentally killed her parents, but Newman managed to find a way out of there thanks to Stan Edgar, who adopted her, taught her, trained her, and groomed her to serve as a Vought agent, masquerading as a political champion of the anti-Soup movement. So much so that she not only helped create the Federal Bureau of Superhuman Affairs, but also became the vice president-elect. She, of course, had her own agenda, but in the end, she was just a mother who was desperate to save her daughter from Homelander. If anything were to happen to Newman, it would have meant that her daughter Zoe would either end up dead or end up in that same hellhole that Vought likes to call Red River. This is why she goes to Huey to seek help and become an ally. But Avita Butcher, under the influence of Kessler, comes in, brings out his tentacles, and simply tears Miss Newman in 2 halves. Now, this was a brutal way of sending Newman out, not only because of how horrific and visceral it looked on screen, not only because of how much blood was spilled or how much shock audiences felt, but because Newman was not an all-evil woman like Homelander or even Butcher. She was beyond the simplistic ideals and the brutish power plays of those two men, and represented a fine blend of interpersonal humanity and outright violence. So when she died, I saw a dedicated, albeit slightly evil, mother lose her fight to protect her daughter. And to make it worse, when Butcher ripped Newman apart like a ragdoll, Zoe was very much present there. I mean, he should have known better, having only recently seen his own wife die before her son, Ryan. I mean, he knew the kind of toll it took on Ryan, and how the kid never really recovered from it. But dear old Butcher didn't care about any of that and just did what he had to do. And to make things worse, Zoe was ultimately sent to Red River, the exact place Victoria had spent so much of her life trying to keep her daughter away from. Billy Butcher, Season 5. Butcher's soul could not be soothed no matter what. He would laugh and smile and smirk or simply feel some satisfaction after taking down his longest ever target, but nothing really brought him peace because that peace went away with Becca, his loving and loved wife. And despite such a huge win, Butcher soon loses track of all his positive emotions, mostly because Ryan, the last connection Butcher had with his wife, chooses not to have anything whatsoever to do with Butcher. He says that Butcher was nearly as bad as Homelander, although a different kind of bad, so he chooses none of his father figures. Butcher was visibly disheartened at this, as he thought he could now live a normal life with Ryan and Terror. But Ryan left, and Terror, well, the poor horny dog died in his sleep peacefully. Terror's death compounded the reaction Butcher should have at seeing Stan Edgar announcing his interim CEO-ship at Vought. And Butcher once again felt the desperate need to soothe his tortured soul. The only way he knew how to do that was through bringing more death. Basically, Ryan and Terror leaving him snaps his mind. And he now knows that everyone is going to move on with their lives, and he would become this lonely man with nothing to look forward to. Maybe that's why it plays almost like Butcher forces Huey into the impossible choice. Butcher makes Huey believe that he's going to unleash the soup virus in Vought Tower, which would exterminate the soups there and spread globally in 2 days. But then he says he's going to wait until the building is filled with soups. You see, he didn't need to wait because the virus was extremely contagious and fast-moving. Furthermore, in the last moment before Huey shoots Butcher, he appears to lift his finger away from the trigger, meaning there's room to read his hesitation as a last-second change of heart. Although I do believe that Butcher did mix the virus with the water of the sprinklers. But the fact remains that he forced Huey into a horrific decision, which was emotionally brutal because Butcher himself says that he sees Lenny in Huey. In fact, even in the comics, Butcher dies at Huey's hands. He's about to pull the trigger on a device that would cause a genocide, but Huey intervenes, and the two of them fall from the Empire State Building, only for Butcher to be paralyzed from the neck down. After this, he lies to Huey about killing his parents, and an enraged Huey hacks him to death, only to learn that he'd been tricked. So yeah, that's that. And it's pretty bloody sad. Oh Father, Season 5. Daveed Diggs, the man who plays Oh Father, made his debut in the Season 5 premiere. And pretty quickly, he became one of the best and most intriguing scene stealers of Season 5. But more importantly, it became clear that Oh Father was not one of those complicated or morally gray characters the show loves to toss at us. He was not the A-Train type who took a path that ultimately found him not only redemption, but an honorable death. And he wasn't like the Deep either, who gets brief moments where you almost feel bad for him before he ruins it for himself once again. Oh Father was a stone-cold bad guy who liked being punished by Ashley in his bed when he was not hiding behind a religious image, and this whole religion thing made him a perfect fit for Homelander's Season 5 arc, where the man thinks he is basically God. His death is also the first proper brutal blood and bone death in the show's final episode. The super-proof ball gag made of titanium that helped bring his end was introduced early in the episode and given to him as a present from Ashley to be used later that night or something. But yeah, that could not really happen. After the boys enter the White House to take down Homelander once and for all, Oh Father goes to intercept them as Homelander is still giving his speech. Initially, he uses his sonic screams to overpower and disorient the boys, but Huey shoots at the sprinklers and the gas blinds Oh Father temporarily, after which Huey tricks him into following it. In fact, Huey shoots Oh Father multiple times as well, but to no avail. Oh Father attempts to kill Huey with his sonic scream, but Mother's Milk placed that titanium ball gag in his mouth, which forces the waves to deflect inside his mouth and blow his entire head up from the inside out, leading to a shower of all things blood, bone, and gore. The Deep, Season 5. The Deep has been around since the start of The Boys, and as far as I can remember, he's always had a chair at the Seven's very cursed table. Now, was he ever easy to like? Absolutely not. The man's moral compass has spent most of the series face down in a fish tank. But I'll admit it, his messed up and pathetic little arc has been weirdly entertaining. That's why Season 5 felt strange initially. It almost felt like the writers had shoved him into the story because, well, he's still there. His Manosphere podcast was a painfully accurate parody of that type of content. And yeah, I laughed, but it also felt like satire for satire's sake. This is a character who once had a much stronger place in the main plot, but then the point became clear that Homelander was leaving him behind. Anthony Starr's character had bigger plans, and in his eyes, the Deep had become useless, pathetic, and easy to ignore. Season 5 was making him pay for every awful thing he had done, but not in the way I expected. His real punishment came when a shark threatened him in the penultimate episode and ordered him to stay out of the ocean. For the Deep, that was his last safe place. Then Starlight set the process in motion to take his health too. So yeah, death by sea creature is what he got, because in the final moments of the show, Starlight takes the Deep on a short trip through the air and they land on a beach. One thing leads to another and the Deep finds himself in the middle of the water, a place he knew was his death sentence. Next thing we know, the ocean creatures he always claimed to understand turn on him, and he's finally dragged under and killed in the most fittingly humiliating way possible. I was curiously satisfied at his death though. Timothy the Octopus, Season 3. It was sad when Cujo died. It's always sad when animals you love die. But I have to commend the boys for making me feel sad for a horny octopus when he was killed unceremoniously and in the worst possible fashion. When it came to Timothy, the boys used the Deep, a man known to be an abuser of women and later portrayed as a shallow loser with a very disturbing fish and ocean creature obsession. And somehow you start to feel sad for this guy. I know, strange place to be emotional in, but that's what happens whenever Homelander is a stakeholder. And in Season 3's Barbary Coast, he is extra cruel. Homelander forces the Deep to eat an octopus. This is Timothy, an octopus the Deep genuinely cares about, while Timothy is served on a platter, literally to be eaten alive by the Deep. The Aquaman spoof can hear him plead for his life and even says Timothy has kids, but Homelander does not back off. And Cassandra, Deep's wife, pushes him to obey the command over a text. So the Deep does it, and what follows is around 45 seconds of pure discomfort, complete with the ink, the texture, and the poor creature still alive in his mouth. But, as you already know, the real discomfort's not only the physical part, it's the fact that the Deep sees Timothy as a friend, a confidant, and, in his very deep way, like a sexual partner too. Earlier, during sex with Cassandra, it becomes clear that Deep is more focused on Timothy in the fish tank than his own wife. Later in Season 3, his thing for cephalopods becomes even clearer when he hooks up with one at Herogasm and later tries to convince Cassandra to have a threesome with Ambrosius, another octopus. Guys, this man has problems, but he's consistent, super consistent. I'll agree that the Deep does see sea creatures like people who deserve kindness, but the sad little tragedy is that he keeps getting them killed. A dolphin gets run over by a truck, a lobster dies after he promises to protect it, and Lucy the whale gets impaled by a bloody speedboat. Black Noir 1, Season 3. I believe one of the most emotionally taxing deaths in the initial few seasons of the show was that of Robin Ward, Huey's former girlfriend. I mean, it was a real shocker, but I have to agree, Black Noir's death could very well be a close second. I mean, it can be called the most emotionally impactful death up to that point in the show. Black Noir was shown as the only person that the man-child leader of the Seven completely trusted and confided in, and he was almost like a father figure to Homelander. However, things soon changed when news of Soldier Boy's revival or resurfacing became public knowledge. Black Noir initially removed his tracking device and made a run for it, only to gather enough courage to speak to Homelander about taking Soldier Boy down together. But the thing is, by then, Soldier Boy had already told Homelander that he was Homelander's dad, which obviously meant that Homelander was now having second thoughts about eliminating Soldier Boy. But the thing is, Black Noir had known all along about the secret of Homelander's dad, but never revealed it. This obviously pissed him off, and as a result, he buried his entire arm in Black Noir's chest, swirled it inside, before finally pulling out, which also pulled out some of Black Noir's entrails right in front of him. Needless to say, after losing Noir, Homelander went more unhinged than he already was, because with Black Noir went away the restraint, and he became a mad, untamed, raging bull with Superman's powers and a garden plant's intellect. So yeah, Noir's death was brutal for the rest of the world too. Translucent, Season 1. I think we could all agree that Translucent was a bitchy person. And much like the Deep preyed on Starlight, so did Translucent. Albeit not in a very obvious manner like the Deep. The soup with invisibility just snuck up on Annie while she was using the restroom. But it was an equally pathetic act of sexual harassment. Translucent was introduced in the show as an original member of the Seven, and apart from the incident with Starlight, he also spied on Huey when he was placing a bug in Vought Tower. This only meant that Huey became a target for Translucent, but it also meant that Translucent became a target for the boys, who wanted to capture him so that they would have a degree of leverage when dealing with Vought. Now, Translucent's skin was so heavily concentrated with carbon that his skin itself served as carbon fiber. This made his skin invulnerable, but it also meant that his skin was an excellent conductor of electricity. So, after Butcher and Huey take him, Frenchie gets involved, and he suggests that since killing him from the outside was impossible, they should instead stick a wad of C4 up Translucent's ass. That would blow him up from the inside because his insides were not as strong as his external skin. After Translucent goes missing, Homelander begins his search for him, but to no avail. I mean, Homelander came very close and nearly caught Frenchie and Butcher, but the leader of the Seven was distracted. Inside, Translucent managed to free himself by throwing a glass of piss on the electrical conduits and almost convinced Huey into letting him go. Huey put down the detonator, but in the last instant, he pulled the trigger and enjoyed a shower of Translucent's insides. Most people agree that Translucent had to die, but I did feel bad for his kid Maverick, who ultimately got dragged into Vought's twisted world because of the legacy his dad left behind. Madeline Stillwell, Season 1. One of the major antagonists of Season 1, Madeline Stillwell climbed up the ladder inside Vought by manipulating one person or another. She also developed a weirdly sexual relationship with Homelander, but by the finale of Season 1, titled You Found Me, the relationship between Madeline and Homelander had reached a breaking point. You see, she was one of the people who had lied and manipulated Homelander about the whereabouts of his son with Butcher's wife, Becca, whom he had raped years ago. So, in the end, Homelander confronts her and she admits that she shouldn't have lied to him, and also that she did love him and was only scared of him. Homelander embraces her and thanks her for finally telling him the truth, before shooting his laser beams straight into Madeline's eyes, evaporating them and burning most of her insides. In these moments, Madeline was especially vulnerable. I mean, she was yet another mother who lost her life in front of her child. Madeline's kid Theodore, aka Teddy, was present in the house when all of this was happening, and previously Butcher had fashioned a suicide vest of sorts for Madeline, hoping that doing so would give him an upper hand against Homelander, but the dude was jealous that she loved Teddy more than him and killed her himself, which wasted the C4 charges and Butcher's plan. Butcher blew up the C4 anyway in hopes of killing Homelander, but Homelander saved him from the explosion, and it seems he saved Teddy as well, because Teddy was seen in Red River in Season 3 as a kid with the power to teleport. Firecracker, Season 5. No matter how much you kiss your Supreme Leader's ass, no matter how much you sacrifice your ideals to shout in favor of your Supreme Leader, there will come a point when that man considers you expendable and pushes you under the bus, kicks you onto the thin ice, or impales your head into a statue. That's Homelander for you. Firecracker gave away her belief system. She even gave up on her god and her church, in the only hope that Homelander would spare her, if not reward her. But when Firecracker stops being useful to Homelander and no longer feeds the fantasy he needs, he turns on her with terrifying ease, banging her head into a statue and killing her immediately. It was one of the most shocking but expected deaths from Season 5, because, you know, that woman had it coming. She'd pulled off some of the craziest shit in the name of Homelander. But, as is the case with everyone else, if he doesn't fear you and he doesn't need something from you, he'll probably kill you, no matter how close you are. People like Stillwell learned this the hard way. Too bad Firecracker couldn't see through Homelander despite being so close to him. But yeah, her death felt more brutal because she had started to become a rather sympathetic character, you know? Frenchie, Season 5. Frenchie's death in The Boys Season 5 Episode 7 hurts because the man knew exactly what he was walking into. After seeing the uranium cell at Fort Harmony, the same kind of setup that gave Soldier Boy his depowering ability, Butcher and Frenchie decide to recreate it. Kimiko even gives them her blessing to test it on her, which already tells you how desperate things have become. I mean, when your plan involves uranium and hope, the vibes are not great. Then, Huey and Butcher get captured by Synapse, the new mind-reading, shape-shifting soup who's working with Homelander and O-Father on their deranged mission to turn Homie into the new Jesus. Homelander decides he wants to deal with Sister Sage first, so O-Father gives him her location, and he heads straight to the boys' HQ. Sage and Kimiko hide inside a zinc vent, because Homelander cannot see through zinc, but there's no space for Frenchie. He goes into the uranium cell instead. When Homelander notices the vent, Frenchie taps on the door to pull his attention away. Homelander enters the cell, and now it's Frenchie face to face with the worst possible man in America. Homelander mocks the idea that they could recreate Soldier Boy's trick, and Frenchie, because he's Frenchie, basically tells him that he already did, and that help is on the way, and then throws in that Nazi putain insult for good measure. Frenchie flips the switch, and the cell starts to release extreme uranium levels. Both their faces start to blister, and the scene cuts to Sage and Kimiko in the vent. They hear Homelander leave, come out, and find Frenchie on the floor. He's dragged himself out with blood behind him, scars across his face, and a wound on the lower right side of his torso. His last words to Kimiko are, "Je t'aime," from the first. Homelander's lasers usually end people instantly. Frenchie made it out wounded, but still in one piece. The burns, blistered skin, blood, and weakness fit acute radiation poisoning. That torso wound is harder to explain, so maybe it came from Homelander hitting him off screen without using lasers. Either way, Frenchie dies, buying Sage and Kimiko the seconds they needed. A-Train, Season 5. A-Train was the first soup we met in The Boys, and his whole arc starts with Robin's death, where he ran through her because she was no more than a random civilian to him. But in Season 5, after he saves Huey and Mother's Milk, he tries to flee the internment camp, and Homelander flies after him. See, ever since A-Train turned against the Seven, Homelander had made him a priority. He'd already sent the Deep and Black Noir after A-Train, Starlight, and Butcher, so when he finally got the chance to kill his former teammate himself, he was not going to waste it. The chase also proves how fast Homelander really is, because he keeps up with A-Train while trying to laser him. But A-Train still has that tiny edge. The problem arrives when a civilian steps out of her car in front of him. Season 1 A-Train would have gone straight through her and called it a bad day, but that's not who he is anymore. Season 5 A-Train chooses to dodge. He loses balance, falls into the woods, and Homelander catches him there. And that's pretty much the whole point. A-Train dies because he refuses to repeat the worst mistake of his life. He knew the risk when he came back to help the boys, and he knew the risk when he saved that stranger. But by then, he actually wanted to be a hero. Before Homelander snaps his neck, A-Train even gets to say what he really feels, calling him pathetic and empty. And I believe his is one of the best arcs, as well as redemption stories in the entire show. And weirdly enough, A-Train's death hurts Homelander too. In episode 2, he talks to A-Train's casket like he lost a brother. He calls himself a big brother to him, wonders if he was too nurturing and forgiving, says A-Train wasn't like the others, and claims he loved him. Which is insane, obviously, because Homelander also bullied and threatened him for years. Lamplighter. Another small redemption arc belonging to the best-known pyromancer in the series. Yeah, so Lamplighter accidentally burned and killed Grace Mallory's grandchildren while he was trying to kill Grace. Although he kept his mouth shut and never apologized for anything, in the end he showed intense remorse, regret, and guilt over his actions. He was not essentially a bad person, so much so that he even lied to Stormfront in order to help the boys. But ultimately, all those years of trauma had taken their toll. He was very fond of his dad and would often reminisce about how his dad used to be proud of him. And when he discovered that his statue had been replaced by Starlight's at Vought Tower, he lost his shit and immolated himself. Soon the sprinklers turn on and douse the flames, but his charred body looked disgusting. On top of that, to escape from Vought Tower, Huey needed his hand, so he chopped it off using a shard of glass. Disgusting stuff. Doppelganger. Homelander kills Doppelganger for being pathetic, and quite frankly, he was a pathetic piece of shit. I mean, first he pretended to be Madeline Stillwell in that black lingerie, and then when Homelander's like, he does not need anyone but himself, Doppelganger turns into Homelander himself and offers him some good old oral, going so far as to say that when Homelander's done, he'd be looking down into his own eyes. This was too much even for that breast milk addicted, baby killing fascist piece of shit to digest. And next thing we know, Homelander simply snaps his damn neck, killing him. I think Doppelganger's death was the least disheartening to me, and somewhere I was relieved because I wouldn't have to see his bullshittery any longer. Good riddance. Blue Hawk. Blue Hawk's death happens around the 70th anniversary of Herogasm, right after Soldier Boy unleashes his power and turns the event into a disaster zone, with several deaths and huge property damage. The party's over very violently, and A-Train uses the opportunity to finally confront Blue Hawk. Now, Blue Hawk was connected directly to A-Train's Season 3 redemption arc. He was a racist soup accused of overpatrol, injuring people, and killing black people in A-Train's old neighborhood. A-Train tries to handle it through Vought first, and they arrange a televised apology at a rec center, which was actually full of bullshit. And the apology itself was pre-written, half-hearted, and convinced pretty much nobody. When people confront Blue Hawk about what he did, he snaps and attacks unarmed civilians. This is where things get personal, because A-Train's brother ends up paralyzed. So, when A-Train finds Blue Hawk outside Herogasm, he's not there for another argument or apology, and least of all a PR statement. He grabs him by the ankle, takes off at super speed, and drags him across the road for miles. Blue Hawk dies in the process, and yeah, it's brutal, but it's also A-Train taking revenge for his brother in the only way the racist ass deserved. However, this causes a problem, because A-Train's damaged heart gives out after he uses his powers again, and he nearly dies. But the strangest part of it all is that Blue Hawk's heart gets transplanted into A-Train's chest, which saves his life and lets him run again. So A-Train kills the man who crippled his brother, then survives because of that same man's heart. Go make sense of that. Web Weaver. A lot of soups in The Boys are twisted versions of Marvel and DC heroes, and Web Weaver is clearly the show's Spider-Man. Except, well, this is The Boys, which means that Web Weaver can produce webbing and has soup-level physical strength. But the curious part is where his web shooter is located. Mother's Milk has to inject Compound V into it, and the thing is placed above Web Weaver's rear end. Anyway, the boys use his Compound V addiction against him and turn him into an informant by paying him with the same substance he craves so bloody much. This betrayal eventually reaches the ears of Homelander, and once Homelander finds out, he simply tears Web Weaver in two in a rage. Popclaw's landlord. If you ask me, the death of this poor guy was the most creative death in the entire show, but it was also pretty brutal for him, and because of what happens to Popclaw herself in the aftermath. Popclaw is a soup. Technically, she's more of an adult film actress, and she also has a secret romance with A-Train. After A-Train makes a few terrible choices in their relationship, because of course he does, Popclaw gets into his stash of Compound V. She invites her landlord over, they get into some sensual roleplay, and then the V kicks in, turning the whole act into a Shakespearean tragedy, albeit with a lot more blood. Popclaw gets too carried away and crushes the man's skull with her thighs. Guys, there's no elegant way to explain it, and the whole scene is super bizarre, sexual, and brutal, and of course, very much The Boys. Becca. Becca Butcher, played by Chantel Van Santen, has one of the roughest arcs in The Boys, and honestly, it'll be impossible for anyone with any heart not to feel terrible for her. After Homelander sexually assaults her and leaves her pregnant, she gives birth to Ryan and tries to raise him as a decent kid. That's the painful part, right? The son she spends years trying to protect ends up tied to the moment that kills her. Not by choice, not with malice, but still. Her death happens in the Season 2 finale, when Stormfront, played by Aya Cash, nearly kills her. Ryan uses his laser eyes to save his mother from Stormfront's grip, but the blast accidentally hits Becca too. She dies while asking Billy Butcher to keep Ryan safe. After everything Becca survived, she probably deserved peace more than most people in this series. The only small comfort is that Ryan lives, and he doesn't side with Homelander during his authoritarian crusade, and goes on to become one of the primary reasons behind Homelander's defeat. Stormfront. Stormfront, who once went by Liberty, was connected to Frederick Vought and the Nazi origins of Compound V, and apart from this, she was one of the earliest and most important soups created through Compound V. She was also insanely strong and became the main antagonist of Season 2, where she pulled Homelander to her side and used his power, ego, and mommy issues for her own agenda. Their relationship became a major problem, and once Stormfront's past came out, Homelander's reputation took a serious hit. Then, by the end of Season 2, things got worse. What she was asking was too much, even for Homelander. In despair, she kills herself by biting her tongue off. However, because this is The Boys, and because the show loves disturbing aftermaths more than clean exits, the real brutality of Stormfront's end's not just the physical destruction. It's the fact that one of the most hateful people in the show ends up broken, powerless, dependent, and still completely poisoned by the ideology that ruined everyone around her. So yeah, that's all in this one. If you liked the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 clicks from you will help tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Also, don't forget to ring that bell icon so you don't miss our next one. Stay safe, have a good one, and, as always, stay marvelous.